Hi, it's John Bolton, and welcome. Great to have you here tonight. I have to say, this is something new for me. I've never done a live stream before, but it's not my live stream. I'm kind of the nuts and bolts guy here tonight. We've got a fantastic guest you're going to love to hear about. We're going to talk a lot about unity. We're going to talk about Canada. I think maybe how Alberta maybe fits into this as well. I don't, maybe even Donald Trump will be brought up tonight. Who knows? But it's going to be a fantastic discussion here tonight. Now, this is part of a series of different interviews being done on my channel tonight. It'll be on other channels in the future, but also on the Alberta Women's Independent Network X and Facebook sites as well. And it's called their Alberta United, the Collaborative Vision series. And my partner in crime tonight, helping out and asking a bunch of questions, Angela Tabak, co-founder of the Women's Independence Network. First off, Angela, thanks for inviting me to do a little bit of this. I think this is going to be a fascinating discussion, and we want people to get involved as well. If you've got a question and you'd like to ask it, by all means do that, and we'll try to fit it into the discussion tonight with our guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment. Tell me, what is the Alberta Women's Independent Network? Give us the background on that.
Well, first off, John, I want to thank you so much for being involved in this. The Alberta Women's Independence Network is a group that we put together about a little over a year ago. And our whole intention is to engage women, although we do have a lot of men that attend our meetings, but to engage women who maybe historically in the past have not been involved politically or not really involved in the conversation that needs to be had around the state of Canada, around Alberta independence, and kind of what our options are. So what we do is we focus on smaller meetings, maybe in someone's home, maybe at a local restaurant, and just having more one-on-one type conversations. We have these wonderful organizations throughout the province that are doing, large town halls and stuff, but that's not for everybody. And so our focus has really been on getting those folks who would rather have the one-on-one conversation. And so the whole reason why we came up with this idea of this Alberta United, this speaker series, is because we keep hearing the same questions over and over again. What could an independent Alberta look like? What do we do to ensure that if we are going through the work of creating something like an independent Alberta, how do we ensure that we're different from what we're leaving, that we're actually solving problems, not just changing venues, if that makes sense?
No, I think that does, and we've been talking to our guest tonight prior to going live here, and I think he certainly does want to solve problems. And I don't think there's enough of that in the world right now. And if you live in Canada, I think that may be the case for sure. Why don't we introduce our guest tonight? I know you've spoken to our guest before. I'm meeting him for the first time tonight. An impressive man for sure. Retired Lieutenant Colonel David Redman. We asked him prior to going live, what should we refer to you as, Lieutenant Colonel? He said, call us Dave. So let's bring him in and introduce him to everybody here. And we'd like to thank you for being here. Dave, we really appreciate it. We're looking forward to talking to you tonight and talk about unity and all the things that are involved with unity when it comes to the country and maybe the state of Canada for sure right now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate Angela.
Yep, don't have your microphone.
Are you hearing him, John?
I'm not hearing him, no.
Are you hearing me, Angela?
I'm hearing you, Dave. Yeah, I can hear you.
Odd.
All right, Dave, let's have you kind of introduce yourself. And we'll
I'll
let
come
John
back.
figure out the audio. You back? Okay, good.
No, I'll come back. I'll just re-log in. Just one second.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, Dave, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll kind of get into why we wanted you as our very first guest on this series.
So thanks, Angela, and to Kathy in the background. I spent 27 years in the Canadian Army. I joined in 1972, and with my family, we lived all over the world. But more importantly, we lived all across Canada. So we met Canadians in every walk of life, all across our country. And as an officer in the Army, so many Canadians all through the 70s, 80s, and 90s joined the Army, and I got to meet fabulous young Canadians from every corner of our country. And so I got to listen to where they were from, what they were proud of, and all the things that came together. When I left the Army in 1999, I ended up working for the government of Alberta in emergency management Alberta, and I got to know the wonderful people of Alberta, north, south, east, and west. My first job was in municipal affairs, running support to municipalities in times of emergency. So I got to meet all the mayors and reeves across 314 communities in Alberta, and so got to know again the Canadians that live in Alberta and all of their emotions and feelings and what was going on. Then, unfortunately, September the 11th happened, and I lost that super job, and I became the director of counterterrorism, working on both sides of our border for 2 years before I took over all of EMA. But again, learning then our neighbors to the south, our interrelationships, and how we all work together through really terrible times. So because of that background, what I saw happening in our country, Canada, was that our country was fragmenting and being pulled apart. And all the Canadians I knew that still lived all across the country talked to me a lot and said, there's something going on and it's not right. And so I went back to some of my earliest training when we were always taught as an officer to present a vision. And so what I wrote in 2024 was a paper, which you referred to when you were posting the video, which is based on a 25-year vision for our country and trying to encourage politicians not to go for the minute to minute, to try and present to the people of our country a 25-year vision that would pull all decisions and all information forward. But I didn't do it for them. I did it for citizens. I wrote the paper for the citizens of our country, and the reason I based it on the 6 national interests that define any country is to arm citizens with the words they need to demand more from their politicians.
I think it's the name of the document that you're referring to is called Canada 2024, A Confident, Resilient Nation or a Fearful, Fractured Country. I think it's fascinating and a really great time to talk about this. You said you wrote it in 2024, and we can go back just a short time in history. That was about 10 months before Justin Trudeau walked out on January the 6th of that year and resigned. And it's a year to the month that Mark Carney won the Liberal leadership and he became the Prime Minister of the country. And it's going to be fascinating to hear what you think the differences between 2024, the years of Trudeau, and whether we've gained any unity here in Canada since Mark Carney is in, and he is now the Prime Minister, and of course was elected on April the 28th. So maybe you can frame the discussion here a little for us, and we can get the nuts and bolts of what's going on here, and then we can have a discussion about your paper and your thoughts on this.
Absolutely. So if you'll just give me a sec, I'm going to share my screen and just give a little bit of a background.
Okay.
So are we good? Can you see that?
Sure can.
All right. So I explained a 25-year vision, and a 25-year vision needs to be built on the national interests that define a country. And I want to be very clear, national interests are the same no matter whether you live in a totalitarian dictatorship or a free and open democracy. It's how you define the 6 national interests that defines your country. But what are they based on? National interests, all 6 of them, are defined by the ethics and values of the citizens. And so when I hear a politician, let's use Trudeau as a first example, who says we're living in a post-nationalist state, that says to me he doesn't believe that the citizens of his country are distinct and different, and that their ethics and values are not important, that they are just a blob that exists in the world. The national interests are the core definition of that 25-year vision. And so for citizens to engage their government, whether it's municipal government, provincial territorial government, or federal government, they need to have the words to have serious and meaningful discussion. And that's why I framed the national interest and then broke the national interest into a whole series of sub-bullets to arm citizens with the words that they then form into their idea of the national interest and have meaningful discussions with politicians at every order of government. Those national interests and that 25-year vision then are the benchmark for all decisions at every order of government, internal and external to our country, for the political leadership, because they're based on the wishes of their citizens, and they know that the vision that they built is one that's shared across the entire nation. Now, you're always going for the 80% solution, never the 100% solution. So when I say across the entire nation, there are pieces that will be different and pieces that will grow and things that evolve. And so when you build that 25-year vision, it's an iterative process, and every 5 years you update it, but you never move away from the 6 national interests, and you can simply redefine small pieces as you grow. Without the national interest, you see exactly what's happened in our country for the past 11 years, and I see no difference between the previous government and the current government in the fact that they have no vision for our country that is longer than 1 year or their term in government. And I mean at every order of government, municipal, provincial, territorial, and federal. And so you need those interests to define and link your whole discussions and decision-making. But they also define then how your nation interacts with other nations, and in particular, your allies and partners. And we see that falling apart when you have a prime minister who at the start of a 1-year term says China is the biggest threat to our country, and he's right. And 1 year later says China is our new strategic national partner, and he's wrong. There's no linkage, and there's no way that our neighbors and allies can understand. So what are the 6 national interests? There they are on your screen: unity, national security, good governance, rights and freedoms, economic prosperity and growth, and personal and community and well-being. And people struggle with what I mean about personal and community well-being. It's clearly defined in the paper and in other countries. That's when you're talking about your healthcare system, most importantly, your education and training system in your country, all the pieces that make up your social fabric. Those 6 define every country in the world. And if you saw Donald Trump's national security strategy, he used those 6 national interests at the start of the paper on his national security strategy to link national security strategy to all 6. The 6 don't exist in isolation. They're constantly linked, and each one impacts on the other, because you can't have national security without economic prosperity and growth. You can't have any of it without good governance. They all are interlinked, and unity pervades through them all. But I put it to you, and the basic definition of a country is when a group of people who share common ethics and values band together in a defined geographic region which they are prepared to defend. That's the definition of a country. So unity and national security are overarching. Without unity and national security, the other 4 can't exist. And so when we get into our discussions, I'll always come back to unity is a cornerstone with national security, and the others change and vary, but the first 2 define a country. So let's talk about unity. And I'm going to have 2 slides here, because unity, first of all, is the common shared values, ethics, and beliefs of the citizens of a country. And I hear lots of talk that the values, ethics, and beliefs are different all across Canada. And I put it to you that I disagree. And it's my life experience, having lived all across the country and having seen soldiers all across the country, that I hope it's still true, right? And we'll get into that discussion, I think, a lot tonight. But unity is the cornerstone to define a group as a nation, because without that unity, why would those people come together in the first place? And we can talk about the history of our country and why we came together, and why, in my opinion, we should stick together. But in the Alberta Women's Independence Network, why Alberta should come together, but only if you can have unity in the province as well before you start down that path.
Right.
They're unique. Unity is unique in every country in the world, and any leader of our country that says Canada doesn't have unique unity doesn't know the history of their own country and doesn't know the people that make up their country. You can have diversity of backgrounds. And I hear this discussion all the time. People come from many walks of life, but you can't have diversity of the basic values, ethics, and belief. And that's the cornerstone of unity. You have to share the same values, ethics, and beliefs. And we're going to get into that, I think, tonight in a lot of detail. But I always use Switzerland as the example. You have the Swiss, the Germans, and the Italians who can't be more diverse when you talk about their basic backgrounds, but they share common values and beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. And so we need to have that discussion in our country, whether it's Canada or Alberta or what the future brings. But the leaders must be personally ready to constantly defend unity and always have confidence in the unity and build unity, and never, ever use the tools that use fear and break a country into smaller groups. So we'll have a discussion about multiculturalism and all those other tools probably tonight. Let's talk about what I believe are the common ethics, values, and beliefs. Our country was built on respect. Respect being the Judeo-Christian value, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so we must only have an immigration system that brings people to our country that have that same type of respect. Now, when I put respect, I also include the Franco-Anglo heritage, and I've heard that about the fact that we've been fighting since time was. Canada was the first country in the world where the French and English stopped killing each other and decided to find a way to work together just enough that they could have their shared values and move forward to stop threats towards their ground. Remember, national security being the number two. And I hear lots of discussions around that, but there were still wars going on all over the world between the French and English, and they weren't in Canada. Individual responsibility and resilience. And this, my heritage, and I'm sure most of the people's heritage that are watching tonight, we all came here from somewhere, and I include the First Nations, but we all have this strong belief that we are accountable for ourselves and that government isn't there to take care of us. And helicopter parenting and bulldozer parenting, I'm sure we'll have that discussion tonight, have pulled apart some of that individual responsibility, but that's got to be a cornerstone of our country for all time. We believe in rights and freedoms. So that's a massive difference from other countries that share the same principles of 6 national interests that don't believe there are rights and freedoms, and a huge pride in our unique democracy. There is no country in the world that has the history of Canada. We're a northern nation with an extreme environment where we banded together in groups to survive our elements, but as well grew as a nation step by step. And we just celebrated the anniversary of Vimy Ridge, where many people say Canada came as a nation. As I told folks before, my grandfather and all my great uncles fought at Vimy Ridge, and many of them are still there. Compassion. We believe in compassion. We don't believe in ridiculous compassion. We believe in compassion for our neighbors and other nations when it is in the full national interest and 25-year vision of our country. Equality. Anyone who wants to come and join our country and be part of our unity has to believe in equality. Notice I didn't say equity, I said equality, in particular for women. Canada was one of the first countries in the world that gave women the right to vote. And I'm a strong believer that equality is a fundamental belief of all Canadians. Finally, international standing. We believe our country has a role to play in the world. And we've watched how it's been expressed by different politicians at every level of government, from municipal, provincial, territorial, and federal. But we have to be a reliable ally. And the only way to be a reliable ally is to be a unified country. So I'm going to pop out of this. That's just the framework to start a discussion. So if you can, in the background, take my sharing away.
Yep.
Looks good. Looks good.
Outstanding.
Okay. So
that's just a framework.
That's fantastic. So a lot of people are commenting. We've got people here. Thanks for being here tonight. They're skeptical of what you're saying right now. But I think you need to understand. I've read the document that Dave put together, and you're going to hear some interesting things tonight. So stick with us, because there are a lot of people skeptical, saying the East-West don't. People are talking about this in the chat right now, Dave, from an East-West perspective, and certainly they don't see there's a lot of unity here. But I want to kind of play devil's advocate with you right off the top here. Is it kind of a pie in the sky? A pie in the sky belief that we can have a 25-year vision here. I mean, I'm 61 years old. I don't recall the government ever thinking 25 years out and having a plan for, children and grandchildren down the way.
Okay, so that's a great place to start. In 1975, I was in my third year at the Royal Military College of Canada, and a compulsory course for every officer who was going to go forward and command troops in our army at that time was required to know the 6 national interests and the definition of them. And there was a half-semester course, a half-year course that we took. In 1965, we had a process that defined the national interests and kept them alive and had a vision for our country. I put it to you, that died in 1968. And for those of you who aren't old enough, that was when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was elected. But we had a process that did that review constantly, and I was taught them. And the reason I was taught them is, as an officer, I knew I was going to be serving all over the world. And whenever I met with people from other countries, they wanted to know about Canada. And I was able to have an intelligent conversation with them based on the 6 national interests and the definition of them. And we used to have white papers on each of the 6 national interests. And we used to have white papers on sub-elements of the 6 national interests. One of those white papers I was taught in the second half of that year, which was the white paper on national defense, which clearly defined the purpose for the Armed Forces of Canada, Army, Navy, and Air Force, and all the sub pieces, and I had to know them all. But we used to have, up until 1965, a regular recurring discussion about a vision for our country. And if you read the paper, you'll see that I start off with in 1967, and the vision that we had for our country, it's because everybody knew it and talked about it. So yes, I believe we can. I think we need to spend the time to reinvest, and it's got to be citizen up demanding it.
Well, you talk in your paper, and you said that right now we've gone through 2 generations who want I think you put it as a risk-free world. And now government seems to be raising them, if we can go back to that. I mean, we're going back 60 years now. Once you do that, and you have the government raising people, we're certainly down what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a slippery slope.
Self-fulfilling prophecy?
Well, yeah, and it's a very slippery slope. And you've got 2 generations that have been brought up this way. And then, it's hard to stop that.
You're absolutely correct. It's very hard. And so in the paper, I describe it, and there's been lots of studies on it. It started with 1975 to 1995, 20 years of when we first started, we all joked about it, helicopter parenting. And that's where a parent would see their child in a difficult situation, and they would pluck their child out of that situation. And those children became completely reliant on someone else to solve all the risk in their lives, their parents. They turned into the next 20 years, which is 1995 to 2015, of what was called, and you can read, there's papers on it and lots of studies, bulldozer parenting. And so instead of plucking the child out, they bulldozed out of the way of their poor child anyone who they felt might cause their child emotional damage. So teachers were fired, professors in universities were fired, politicians were fired, government people in industry were fired by people pushing out of the way of their children. And we've created this society. Remember, those people now are 40 to 50 years old, and they're running our country, who believe that the government is responsible for all risk in their lives. And so you ask me, is that hard to reverse? I say, yes, it'll take at least a decade to start, because where do you start? You start in national interest number 6, which is personal and societal well-being, and it has to start in our school system at kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, where we expect children to manage themselves like they do in a country like Japan. I just saw an excellent video on X of a guy saying the best country in the world, a 5-year-old Japanese child is expected to walk a mile to school by themselves every morning with a giant backpack. And when they get to all the streets with 6 lanes of cars, they put their hand up and all the cars stop and the child walks across. Children are taught to be independent. And we know that that's how you build resilient citizens. So yes, I believe there has been severe damage intentionally done. It started as a joke and it grew into an intentional system where we divide people by the whole idea of risk. And that's why I put it in my matrix that a value of citizens who believe that risk is their responsibility is a unity thing in a 25-year vision that we have to build back to.
Well, we've got a question here from the chat, and if you've got a question, we'll certainly try to get it on if we can. This is Patrina, given Ottawa's overt disdain and disrespect for Western Canada and Alberta, including hostile prosperity-killing policies for over a decade, how does Colonel Redman see unity taking place? This is a question I was going to ask in a bit, but might as well get to it right now, and I think it will open up more discussion here.
So I'll start right away. The second word in that question was Ottawa's. And people do that all the time. They say the government, they say Ottawa, they say it's the Liberal Party of Canada, folks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's be very clear. Let's put blame where blame lies. Up until, if you read my paper, up until 2015, Maclean's magazine annually published an article every year, the 99 reasons why it's better to be a Canadian than anything else. So in the last 11 years, we've watched a government, the Liberal Party of Canada, directly attack the unity of our country. Why do they do it? For obvious reasons, okay? So I contest that it's Ottawa, it's the Liberal Party of Canada, and the way you fix a country is you get rid of politicians that don't reflect you at the national level, and there is a way to do that. It's very hard, but you actually have to, as citizens, remove a government, right? And yeah, I know all about bribery and fraud and backroom deals and all the rest of it, but if you don't start, it'll fall apart.
But, I hate to say this, but elbows up, Dave. I knew eventually, it would slip into the conversation, but I mean, it's what you're talking about here is divide and conquer, right?
Correct.
That's what this is about, divide and conquer. So we look at what happened back on April 28th last year, and the Liberals divided this country up to those who knew what the Liberals, and you're talking about the problems we've got the Liberals and what they've created here, those of us who knew what the Liberals were doing and knew that they were the problem in the country, and the others and the Liberals, they just strategically used Donald Trump to create a fear, and that's a great way to motivate people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so why do citizens permit it? It's the whole discussion about rebuilding resilient citizens. And I'm sorry if we'll end up there anyway.
Yeah.
Why do you think the people of Calgary voted in Nenchi and Gondek? Why do you think the citizens of Edmonton voted in NAC? Do you really think Alberta is completely different other than rural Alberta? Because I will put it to you that all across this great country, from coast to coast to coast, the rural Canadians are sick and tired of the Liberal government. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, how do we get the urban centers to come back to demanding a 25-year vision for our country based with unity and national security? Because I'm telling you, if we don't, geopolitics is one of the things I've spent my whole life studying, okay? Because I used to get sent to some pretty horrible places. So I always wanted to know what's the geography and what are the politics within that geography that trap different nations into possible futures. The neighbor to our south is our best ally and our best trading partner. Always has been, always will, if we don't treat them with disdain. And so we, as a country, right from the very beginning, recognize that manifest destiny is in their best national security interest, i.e. they want all of Canada. So if we fragment, it's only a matter of a decade until we won't be having to talk about whether or not Alberta wants to be independent. We'll be just talking about what's important in America. And I remind you that America just went through the Biden government. So everybody that thinks the US government is way better than our government, no. So we either have to fix our country or we will be Americans. They've always believed in manifest destiny. It's not Donald Trump. It's the United States of America. But when we do our part, they stop talking about it. Now, I know the rurals in Canada. Look at that slide, because I've done this presentation with lots of people, and the rurals love those values and beliefs. But I find big pushback when I talk to urbans. And it's the same in Alberta.
Angela, would you like to ask something?
Sorry?
Angela, would you like to ask something?
Well, I'm really intrigued by the idea of the 25-year vision in it. And I can totally see how that would be the solution to a lot of the problems that we're coming up against. But my question, and I'm just trying to understand it better, where did that 25-year vision source from? Was it the politicians who had a vision and then put it forward and it became part of your white papers that you studied? Or where did that come from?
Because that's the way it was presented to me a long time ago. And you remember we used to use 5-year voting cycles, right? Government lasted 5 years. It still does in law. We put in place the American system of 4-year mandatory elections, which I personally think is a ridiculous idea, and I can explain why later. But the reason it was 5 years was then every 5 years you update it. And the reason you make it 25 years is some things take a long time. To build national security and maintain national security, the big elements take a long time. If you're talking about industry and strong industry, if you're going to ship, remember in 1965, we were the hewers of wood, the miners of ore, and the fishers of the sea. And I'm sorry, those that weren't in their teens in 1965 don't remember that. But we were very proudly that. But we kept saying we want to be more. We want to be manufacturers. We want to be people into the advancing sciences. And so there was a big movement in 1965 to take our economic prosperity and growth out of resource industries, keep them there, but add more. And knowing full well that it would take decades to keep pulling forward those types of industry, because other than the automotive industry, we weren't excelling, and we wanted to excel more and not just be, right? So the big thing of the Canadian in the lumberjack shirt, one day we wanted them to be, science and technology. So the reason for the 25-year was it was 5-year increments, supposedly of an elected government going forward, and people buying into that vision. And people used to write things. And I'll give credit where credit is due. I think Jean Chrétien actually tried to do one of those when he produced the red paper in 1993 for that election, okay? So there was a time when we were trying to go back to this vision and say, we can be this. But they based it on all 6. And John, you asked a great discussion either before the podcast or at the start of it. All 6 are interrelated. You can't do any one without all 6, and all 6 impact on all 6. So when citizens are having this discussion and want to have these meetings, and I think AWIN is a perfect example, the kitchen table discussion with a glass of wine, talking about it and not getting emotional, just trying to, why do you think that? Why do you think that? Right? Because I'm telling you, it's so fundamental that citizens must demand better from municipal government, from provincial government, provincial territorial, and from federal government. And if we don't, they'll play this game forever. The tools are obvious. I mean, Stalin figured all the tools out a long time ago, and we've just watched them being used. The methodologies are different, but the tools are the same. And it's always fear. and it's always division. And so when you get to DEI, that was nothing more than a division tool. Cancel culture, a division tool. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. Yeah, we're better than you. So it's time to say no. And as citizens, we've had this discussion all along. And unfortunately, in my opinion, 2015, the end of the 40-year cycle I talked about, helicopter parenting and bulldozer parenting, happened at the perfect time for a guy named Trudeau, who came to power in 2015. And he realized that he had a society that was devolving into fear all by itself, that risk was not their responsibility. And instead of trying to reverse it, the pandemic hit at the perfect time, and he tripled down.
Yeah,
so
well,
got to fight it back.
Yeah, I remember specifically during the pandemic, the thing that turned things, the tide for him, when he was standing up and he was talking about, the injection and getting vaccinated, and we won't have those people sitting on buses and trains and planes with us. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is pitting Canadian against Canadian, and this works, much like the Donald Trump thing did just about a year ago. It's almost a year ago to the actual day. But yeah, I saw that happen during the Trudeau years, and boy, they used this to great effect. Dave.
So if I can back you up 2 years,
sure.
At the start of the pandemic, we knew, we being anyone who was able to read and had one of these, didn't have to be an intelligence analyst, that the only people who were at risk from COVID-19 were seniors over the age of 65 with 3 or more severe comorbidities. Yes, anyone could die of COVID, but the risk of dying of COVID from the age of 65 with 3 more comorbidities going down was less than seasonal influenza, and we knew it. So long before we ever got to the vaccine, the use of the non-pharmaceutical interventions, and there's 15 of them, everything from hand washing through to closing of business, closing of schools, wearing of masks, all the rest of that had been studied for 2 decades. And categorically, the risk-benefit analysis was never use an NPI other than hand washing, because they do far more harm than good. We never should have closed schools. We never should have worn masks, all of it. So as an emergency manager and as the co-chair of the team that wrote the pandemic influenza plan, based on that, back in 2005, we knew that we shouldn't be using these. So the question always becomes why? And so now we get to unity. The whole intent at that moment in time was to use the fear of the dissolving unity where citizens believed risk was the government's to solve, and to start using NPIs knowing they would do terrible damage in the future to keep the citizens from fighting back against the government. So we have to rebuild unity. And I would put it to you that in the rural areas of all of Canada, the values and beliefs are still the same. And it's how do we then permeate those values and beliefs back into our society?
I'm just wondering, but
it's a 25-year process.
We keep talking about the rural areas and we keep talking about the cities. It seems the rural areas have got it right. So how do we bring
in my opinion, and that's why we're having this discussion, because not in everybody's opinion. Oh, sorry, we lost you, John. John, you've gone mute. John, you're mute.
Yeah, I don't think he's hearing. That's okay. We'll have Kathy message him. There we go. Well, you know what? While we're waiting for John to come back, Dave, why don't you take a look at this other question that has come up? Conservative governments have to cater to Eastern Canada due to the structure of our government system. How can this be unity? And I'll add to that, like, how do we work around that when we do see a history within the country of efforts to make things more equal, specifically for the Senate, with the Reform Party and pushing for a Triple E Senate, and not being successful in that. So how do we work around that to be able to?
So there's the strategic level. I'll do the tactical level first right away. I'm a strong believer there should be no Senate in Canada. There is no aristocracy in our country, and we should never put a Senate in place in the first place, because the entire purpose of the Senate in the British system was so that the nobles wouldn't give up their power and they'd keep the commoners at bay. In our country, I don't believe we should have ever had one, and definitely now we shouldn't. But the control of our country and the conservative movement catering, I'm a soldier, okay, and I've lived through a pretty horrible civil war. And so I always believe in evolution, not revolution. I've seen revolution firsthand. And so the Conservative Party, I understand how politics work. It's filthy, it's dirty. I worked directly for Premier Klein for 5 great years. He was a brilliant man, but I always understood, and at times he would say no to me. And the reason he would say no is because the electorate wasn't ready yet. And so you do it in steps. And each government, if they told the citizens a vision based on 6 national interests and explained why. And that's what we always miss. The why is never there. It's just, we're going to do this. But if a conservative government actually took the time to say, I believe in 25 years. So when you're 20 years old and it's your turn to run this country at 45, here's where we think we can get it to. And are you excited by that? Yes or no? Number one, I think they would get far better buy-in. And I don't care the label that you put on the government, you know, NDP, liberal or conservative. Certainly the liberals have been saying their vision for the next 2 years and people have been buying it. Why can't we have one with a greater vision? But you have to be understanding that it will be iterative, that we're going to do this first and this first. And yes, equalization is one of the things that can definitely be iterative, so that in 5 years, a government span, equalization will stay the same in the first year. It'll be reduced by 25% in the next year. It'll be reduced by 25% in the third year, and reduced until we do away with the program. And you have to be ready as provinces and territories to stand on your own 2 feet. Therefore, knowing the funding is going to disappear, maybe New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, you want to look at oil and gas that's sitting under your ground. Maybe Quebec, you want to do the same. And we're hearing governments in those jurisdictions talking about it now because of the price of oil and a war in the Middle East and all. But how about if we did it saying, we know your citizens want jobs, and we know that 25% of your citizens currently are unemployed or on seasonal work, and we can encourage you to let the private sector, not the government, into your province again and start to build forward. Because Nova Scotia, back in Confederation, used to be a powerhouse, shipbuilding, and why have they stopped? Because it's okay. Someone else will send you money. And so it's got to be iterative, but you have to have a vision saying this is where we're going, and that's why we're not going to do this anymore, and we're going to phase it out, because the government can't go from full equalization to none without a complete collapse of their economy. So we're going to do it over a period of time. And so look at each one of those issues that we talk about here in the West. Look at them one at a time and figure out how you can walk that forward. But I put it to you that the rurals in Ontario have been begging their government for the ring of fire for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not that people haven't talked about it. It's that government got away with destroying unity to achieve their next election.
Well, and I think there's a real vacuum of leadership, because what you're describing would require a lot of strong leadership to be able to basically stand up to the last 40 years and what we have become, to stand up to that and say, no, we're going to do it differently now, and we're going to get back to where we used to be. And I think maybe that's what it comes down to, is just a very basic lack of leadership. And how do we fill that vacuum? I'm not sure.
I half agree, and the other half is the citizens let them. Okay, mm-hmm. So if we deal with them in 2 parts, leadership conforms to what citizens allow in so many cases when you're talking about politics. And so we need to start immediately demanding more of our leaders. And like I say, everything starts at the local level, no matter what you're talking about. And so a community without jobs wants jobs. They need to elect a leader that wants to invite the private sector in, or a government that will give them more money. But when you have a national debt like ours now, partly because of COVID, but Trudeau started it in 2015. He intentionally wanted to increase the national debt. And my definition of communism has always been when 51% of the citizens of a country depend monthly on their salary coming from government. That's when you've achieved communism. And we're there. So it's got to be a walk back, right? You got to walk it back. But at the same time, you have to, as politicians, look past the end of your term. So maybe we look out 10 years and then 15, but you have to look past when you may not be in power. And the citizens then say, I'm not going to elect a government that won't take us to that vision. And then the competition between the leaders is who will get you to the vision best. Not a different vision. Who will get you to the vision that we've agreed on the best? And at the kitchen table discussion based on all 6 national interests. We're talking unity today, but let's have that same discussion about the next 5. What do you expect in a good government, right? Because I've heard in the Alberta separatist movement, what type of government are we going to have? Geez, I don't know. Let's have that discussion and let's have it seriously. Let's talk about rights and freedoms. What are they? Are they guaranteed or are they not? If some of them are, but some of them aren't, which ones? Why? Let's talk about an economic prosperity and growth. But I think the separation movement spent all their time on 1 out of 6. You're really good on the economic prosperity and growth, but you miss some of the others.
I think I can assure you that is coming, Dave. And I've talked to people who are working on that plan of how we move forward. And that's a very difficult. Do we keep the system we've got? Do we go more like a constitutional republic like the United States? But that is certainly coming. And I think a great discussion here because of your 6 things you're talking about here. This certainly, maybe the leaders of the independence movement can look at those things as well. Did you say that the government does what the people allow? Is that what you said just a while ago? I kind of focused in on that. Is that what you said there? That sentence?
There's an ancient saying: "You get the government you deserve."
Yes,
okay?
yes.
So that's the corollary.
Yeah, yeah. So is that true? The government does what the people. Well, I think of what we want here in Alberta.
In the democracy.
In a democracy, okay. Because do you think we have a democracy right now in Canada?
No.
Okay, so that's a quick one. Because people in Alberta, we're hardworking people. We're self-reliant. We believe in personal responsibility. We believe in getting things out of the ground. We want our prosperity. I mean, this is coming around to the independence movement. A lot of people are talking about this in the chat right now. And the government's saying no to us. They're not doing, we would like to get the oil out of the ground, but we can't. The government really isn't doing what we're asking them to do. How are we going to do this? And with such a divided country, a large country, I wonder how that's even possible.
So first of all, I want to challenge your premise.
Okay.
You say Albertans want. Mm-hmm. I put it to you that 35% of Albertans want. And that's why you had Nenshi and Gondek and now NAC in our cities that don't want. They totally believe in climate change and mm-hmm. believe that what Alberta was doing was wrong and helped block with the federal government. So Albertans don't. You can't use that generalization with me. I disagree with it because I strongly believe that our current elected government in Alberta does want. I agree with that. But and yes, they got enough votes, but at our municipal order of government, there's clearly a divide between rural and urban in terms mm-hmm. of moving forward. And we need to have this discussion amongst ourselves and include the rest of Canada in a way to look at it differently. So you asked me, and I gave you a very blunt answer, a no. I believe that Canadians have in the last 11 years, but more particularly in the last 5, permitted a government to get away with bloody murder, and I mean Canadians in general, and the fraud and the corruption, we never even question anymore. Like at least when the WE scandal happened, there was a little moral outrage that lasted for about a week and a half. This latest ones that we're seeing now happen almost weekly in terms of money going like champagne, going directly to his wife for a railroad to nowhere. It doesn't even get the light of day. So when you get to good governance, one of the bullets in my good governance is a free and independent media. And I've seen on so many podcasts the discussion about alternative media, us, and the growing prominence of it, and the need for it. And that still, obviously, there are some people that are watching CBC and Global and CTV. But I put it to you, as a soldier in 1972 in the Army, we used to call the CBC the Communist Broadcasting Corporation. And that was in 1972 because it was Pierre Trudeau telling us that Mayo and Fidel Castro and Khrushchev were the best form of government in the world, and CBC backing it. So we've always had that challenge. And so it's finding ways to build a free and independent media again. And so that's iterative, and we're getting there. I'm going to jump sideways for just a minute. When I was a young officer, captain, I was posted after my first 2 operational tours back to teach young people. And we were forced to watch a video. It was called "You Are What You Were When." You can still Google it. It's in 2 parts. And basically the premise, really fast, is you are what you were brought up by your parents and your school and your first jobs. And you can't break who you are without a significant emotional event. And that military training, the entire purpose of basic training, is to take you from who you were and turn you into somebody who would defend your country and be prepared to give your life. Because your parents didn't say, run in front of bullets, it's fun. Okay? So somewhere along the line, this ends and you have to start a new life. And in 13 weeks, you could do that. And there's a way to do it. Unfortunately, now we're talking about a country. You are what you were when, and how do we now start to walk forward in an incremental way forward? You can either do it the way I propose, which is through an iterative process, and try to get Canadians to be more involved and understand the 6 national interests and why the Canadian Armed Forces isn't a nice to have. It's the force of last resort. There's 10 things make up national security. The very last one is the CAF. It's not the first, it's the last, right? So how do you do that? So you can either do it through meaningful, iterative discussions with the people like Angela and Kathy are trying to start for Alberta, but I'm talking the whole country. Because if we don't do that, I truly believe that within less than 5 years, probably less than 2, Canada is about to go through the Great Depression, just like my parents did in the 1930s, or World War III with Communist China. One of those 2 things is going to happen unless there's a significant change in the world, and in particular in Canada for the Depression, in the next 2 years. And so that significant emotional event, groups like this, if that does happen, you have to be ready to help Canadians walk back out the other way, being resilient Canadians again. That got you by surprise.
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't expect that, but how can Canada, being the country that is, small country, not all that influential, do this? How can it assure these things don't happen? Just little old Canada here up in the north. Of course, we sit just above the United States of America.
Okay, let's divide it into 2 parts. Let's talk about the Great Depression. If we actually free our private sector to rebuild our country and remove the ridiculous legislation that's been put in place to freeze them in place, within 3 years, we can have some pretty significant projects either in the ground or already running. If we bring investment back into our country, we can stop the Great Depression. If we don't, we won't. That's in my opinion. Communist China. If you haven't talked to people like Sam Cooper and Scott McGregor and Mitchell, the Mosaic Effect, China is all through our country. I'm an ex-intelligence officer, ex-counterterrorism. I know this. They are everywhere. They're running the cartels. They are running the United Front Work Department. They are funding activities in every one of our major cities, but more insidious. They're running stuff in our schools. They're running stuff all across our country. We can stop that. We have to choose to stop that. Okay? So there's, if we cease to be the landing pad for communist China in Canada through the cartels, through the United Work Front Department, through the cartel, the other groups that are operating, funded fully by China, with our knowledge. You can't tell me you haven't seen it on TV, just like me. I mean, I'm not talking about secret stuff. They're funding all orders of government in our country, from British Columbia to Prince Edward Island. There was just the huge expose on the money laundering and PEI through the casinos, and the complete takeover of the government of PEI and the government of BC and the government of Vancouver and the government of the cities in our country. We the citizens have a say. But if we choose not to, within 2 years, the United States either has to remove China from our grounds, or China will come in force and believe it can get away with it. And China doesn't just want Taiwan. Let's be honest. China has made very public its intentions by 2049 to be the only superpower in the world. The only. That means the United States doesn't exist as a superpower. So we're doing our part to help them right now. We need to stop that. But that means there's got to be some kind of change in the Canadian public.
Go ahead, Angela. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, Dave, what you're saying, I mean, in sitting and talking with Albertans, especially over the last year, and I don't know how many hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that I've sat with and talked with, what you are describing with the whole problem with China and going into a Great Depression, many Albertans are very, very aware of that see it coming. And although ideally it would be wonderful for Canada as a whole to make that break, as you have described, I think a lot of Albertans have gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, we are down to a shorter time period. Like you're saying 2 years, and people are looking at another 4 years of the Liberal government, to the point where they're saying our only lifeboat right now is Alberta independence. And to make that break, I mean, that definitely would be a break. Now, does that come without other consequences? Of course it doesn't. Maybe greater consequences than most of us would understand, and you with your life experience and where you have served throughout the world would know better than a lot of us would. However, in looking at that situation where it's like, we've got to make a break, we're coming down to the wire where we're going to end up with a really bad situation. For a lot of people, Alberta independence is looking like that. Okay, hate to do it, but this is the only viable option that can happen quickly enough to possibly make that break.
Number one, you won't save Alberta because the Chinese won't let you, and neither will the Americans. And when you start to, if you look at geopolitics, the countries that dominate the next 100 years have access to both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Canada, the United States, and Mexico are the only three in reality that can do that. So we can either do that as a realistic and strong partner with our friends to the south, or they'll do it for us. And when they do it for us, there's an ancient saying, every country has an army, theirs or somebody else's. And so I'm at the stage now, when the freedom, I'm the guy that wrote the blockade support plan for the government of Alberta on how to stop people that are blockading infrastructure inappropriately, in particular critical infrastructure. I did that back in counterterrorism days. And so when the Freedom Convoy first started, I went, this isn't going to turn out well, because sooner or later they're going to start blocking critical infrastructure and somebody's going to have to do something. But the movement itself changed the world. Mm-hmm. And so a movement like that can change Canada. There is ways to stop our current federal government and make them take notice, but it can't be solely sourced or originate from Alberta, right? If you want to get Central Canada's attention, it's about time that the people of Central Canada realized what they're about to lose. And stupid little things start to give you an indication. Remember when Ralph Klein got rid of the two King heirs? And I was working for Ralph Klein at the time, and I thought it was a terrible decision, and we can have that discussion another time. But Doug Ford tried to get away with a little Learjet for himself to jet around, and the citizens went, not on our dime.
Mm-hmm.
The citizens are at the point all across this country, in particular the rurals, but some of the urbans too. And so it's finding a spark, and a spark that isn't just in Alberta, because we can have a serious discussion about national security and the national security side. But if you don't have an intelligence service, if you don't have a border service, if you don't have an immigration service in place now, it won't be ready in 2 years, right? So you have to start having those serious discussions, and they won't be enough to stop the US going, you're still a threat, because of China, because of, so we need to elevate the discussion strategically, operationally, and tactically, and we need to have the discussion what iteration looks like, and we need to bring other people at the grassroots level into the discussion, and that's why I wrote the paper. And don't get me wrong, I'm as pessimistic about some things in life, but my wife always calls me Pollyanna, because I never give up. I keep churning, and that's why I wrote the paper and all the rest of it. And yes, I do understand all the terrible things that have happened to Alberta in the history of our country, but stop being a victim and start building a solution, okay? And separation may sound wonderful. It's going to be, okay, one little story. Everybody try and remember where you were on October 30th, 1995, because I'll tell you exactly where I was. I was sitting on a concrete floor with my entire battalion sitting on the floor around me. And we sat there till 4:30 in the morning with one crappy little black and white TV set watching the referendum in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
1/4 of my battalion were French Canadians. Remember I told you I had soldiers from the whole country, tons from the Maritimes, lots from the West, a whole whack from Central Canada. And we sat on the floor watching that vote count. Because, number one, we were in the middle of a freaking horrific civil war, and watching Christians do unbelievable things to Christians all around us every day. Wives killing husbands in their beds at night, husbands murdering and raping women in the streets, just unbelievable every day. So we're watching this referendum, wondering if we had a country to go home to, and 1/4 of my battalion wondering if even they were to rip their Canadian flags off their shirts. So all these things in our lives form our opinions, okay? And that night certainly had an impact on me and all the soldiers in my battalion. And so civil war is a horrible thing, and everybody thinks that this will be an emotionless separation. I put it to you, it won't. I watched it happen in front of my eyes, and I know that there are the same players who are trying to divide our country up right now and divide our citizens against each other aren't just going to down tools while this discussion carries on. They're going to try and destroy anyone that pushes back against them. And countries like China and Iran, the IRGC, the largest concentration of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in the world, is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know that. They think it's in the Middle East. So we need to have a discussion about how to lift our whole country out of this threat.
I would say to you, Dave, that people in Alberta, we do not see ourselves as victims. I don't think I'm a victim. I think I'm being abused. We think that the solution is not Canada. We don't ever think we're going to get a fair shake from the Liberals. We don't think that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are going to come to our rescue. We don't think things will change because what dictates what happens in Canada happens out east and Alberta's out west, and that's why we want out. So I don't see us as victims at all.
If you say
We're
you're abused,
determined.
you're
We're
a victim.
determined here, and we're ready to fight back. That's what I'm saying to you.
Oh, if you're ready to fight back, then
Yeah.
then that's wonderful. But I put it to you that you may be surprised that you don't represent all of Alberta. That you
No,
don't
and I know
represent
that, but we
50%
need
of Alberta.
50. We need a question that is agreed upon, and we need a clear majority.
Okay,
That's what we're
don't get
told.
me wrong. I am a 100 supporter of the referendum.
Because we have to
That's
have
democracy.
Well, I mean, but are you
I
a
believe in
100%
democracy.
supporter of Alberta independence? Are you, you're obviously not.
No, I'm not. And
No.
and I think I'm starting, I've only done about 50% of or less of my reasons why, but
Mhm.
and I know we'll never agree, and that's fine. That's what democracy's all about, right? And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
to me, I have tried by the paper and by the discussions and the people I've met with and the presentations, because many of the leaders of the separatist movement are my friends. I know them well. They
Mhm.
talk to me all the time. I go to dinner with them.
Right.
It's not like and so they always ask me the question, well, what would you do if there was a referendum, which I'm hoping there will be, and if more than 51% of the province voted for separation? And I'm very clear. Number one, I'm 72 years old and getting older by the day. I would have a family meeting with my 3 children and my 6 grandchildren and ask them where they're going to live. If they choose Alberta, then I'll do everything to make their life as good as I can. If they choose somewhere else to go, I'll go with them, because I'm 72 and I'm not the guy that's going to lead a country out of a mess. I'm just a guy to try and give the tools to citizens to make their lives better.
And you've given us a lot to think about, for sure. And not just your paper, but what you've shared tonight, which is awesome. I think we've had some good questions, John, that have popped up.
Yeah.
Do we want to address a couple of those? Or
Let me
do
go
we need
back
to go
here.
back a little bit further into unity? Is there more to say about that?
Yeah, this is interesting. I want to get to this because I was thinking this as well. And Jacqueline Littler, she sent this question, and this is actually something I had as a concluding question. And I'm going to read what she says, and it's very similar to what I was thinking after reading your paper, Dave. Canada is far too big to be governed by a place in Ottawa, and our values are different. And my question was, with the diverse opinions and voices across the country, some would call them distinct societies. You will remember that from 95. That was in the referendum there. Distinct society in the East Coast. I think we're a distinct society here in the West. Differences in political beliefs. Is Canada too large, spread out too much to have this unity you talk about? Thank you, Jacqueline, for your question, because you were thinking a lot like me.
So the answer in one word is no. And the reason is very simple to explain. Is the United States too large to be a country?
No, but they have a different setup.
Of course they do. And Canada can have a different setup too. And why, even though they have Democrats and Republicans and independents that fight constantly, that have distinct societies. Do you think Louisiana, after
Sure, I agree. Yeah.
they have distinct societies all over. So do I believe it's possible? Absolutely. Do I think Canadians want it? I think it's up to Canadians.
How many years did you say before Depression or World War III?
2.
2 years?
2.
3 more years plus a little of the Liberals. So that's pretty much guaranteed, don't you think?
Is it 3 more years with the Liberals?
Yeah. They've got a majority right now. They'll be
Of course they do.
2029
Can
before they're done.
Canadians remove that majority through a scandal? Which scandal is going to be enough to piss Canadians off to overthrow their own government legally?
That's
At what point in time do the Liberal backbenchers realize that Canadians have turned on them in their constituencies and not vote with their government and bring their own government down? There are so many reasons why this government may not survive. And the scandals come every day. At what point in time do Liberal voters in their constituencies say enough?
I don't know. You've mentioned here in this conversation that you mentioned the we scandal, and people got a little bit upset about that for less than a week, really. And we've had others, and it hasn't brought this government down.
But the charm offensive from Trudeau was still on, and I really think Canadians are seeing Carney differently.
I think you're seeing Carney differently.
I don't mean yet a majority, but
Yeah.
I think people are seeing his connections to his 143 declared conflicts of interest and what he's doing with them every day, and his flip-flop on China and his flip-flop. I think Canadians, I give them more credit.
But Dave, people see Donald Trump as a bigger threat than communist China. That's what they've convinced the elbows up people, the gray hairs who voted for him back on April 28th. And he came out with a speech just on the weekend reiterating the same thing and talked about the great Satan. He didn't use those words, but it was brought up over and over and over again.
Because
and
it's
it
worked
works.
until now.
It works. It does work.
What in your opinion, what do you think is going to happen on July 1st with Kuzma?
What do I think is going to happen?
And what brings on the Great Depression that I'm talking about if it's not World War III? Donald Trump will end Kuzma. And I know all the rules that it goes for 10 years and all the rest of it. Donald Trump will use tariffs. He will declare us as a national security threat. And Carney has given him every single thing he needs. And Kuzma will die. And there will be tariffs on every good in Canada because we're putting tariffs on US goods and they're pretending for right now. They went silent. Did you not see them go silent in February and not even talk about it? Because they had Iran, the fish in Iran to fry, and then maybe a little time in Cuba. That won't take long because they're not attacking Iran. They're not attacking Cuba. They're attacking China, right? That's what they're doing. All these moves are to disrupt China. And China is the threat in Canada to the US, and end of June, it will be our turn. And that will cause Canadians to go, well, if Trump is the only threat, why are we now in the breadlines? I don't know if Angela, if you were at the National Citizens Inquiry in April of 2022 when Regina Gorman talked.
I actually, I was one of the
speakers. And I quote, she was tortured for 9 months in a prison because she was one of the original members of Solidarity. And she said nobody would join Solidarity until they had to line up for bread. That was her direct quote. And afterwards she came to me because I had been there at the time, and we had a great big hug and picture. But that stuck with me. Nobody wanted to join Solidarity until they had to line up for bread. When 25% of Canadian youth are unemployed, when do they hit the streets?
Well, no, I've had people say that to me. People will realize they're in real deep trouble. I've said Canada's got to hit rock bottom before things will get better. That's what I've said. And people have said, when people start starving and they can't afford food and they are in bread lines. That's
and
when
I say July.
Realize. So you say it's going to come that quick. You think people...
I say that's when he's going to take action, and Canadians within 2 years will feel the effects.
But doesn't this brainwashing about Trump, how does this wear off? This is just Donald Trump attacking Canada again, right? This is a rupture, as Carney calls it.
Number one, we have to empower Canadians to realize that what happens in Canada is Canada's problem. And Canadians can solve Canada's problem. Donald Trump is no different than Grant in right at the end of the American Civil War saying, I've got 1 million men in arms, let's go take Canada. And the reason he didn't is it wasn't worth his time. The reason it wasn't worth his time is, number one, we unified and built a great railroad. And number two, we said, we'll do our part. So the way to stop Trumpism is for Canada to wake up and do its part and stop poking America in the nose and become the reliable partner that we were through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, right? And until we do, Donald Trump will keep whacking us. And yeah, Alberta will get a little respite because he loves our oil. Short of that, he'll come for us next. Because he can't let any piece of Canada be open to interference from the enemy that says it will be the only superpower. You have to look at it geopolitically, right? And so Donald Trump will thank us very much for our oil. And if we want to become a state, great. My position has always been, I'm a Canadian, I'll die a Canadian. I don't want to be an American either.
Right.
I served with the Americans. I love the Americans. I lived in California for 2 years getting my postgrad. I went to school with the Fast Attack Boys, with the U.S. Marines, they're good friends. I really like them. But I'm a Canadian and we think differently. We really do. Because if Alberta goes alone, within a decade, we'll be a state.
So I think
us not to be.
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Trump and those who follow him.
Yeah, Angela.
The other thing I always say is Trump is 80. He won't be around forever, folks. But are you ready for the next Biden? Because the Democrats are lining them up.
But the argument or the discussion has been that Carney's waiting for midterms, which are coming up this year, and they'll neuter Trump. Maybe the Democrats will win. Who knows? I mean, I think they're well, pardon the expression, batshit crazy. But that's what I think Carney's. Yeah, but I think maybe that's what Carney's trying to do: wait Trump out for midterm elections, which are coming up. Right now, he's not riding as high in the polls. Iran isn't working out quite the way he wants.
Comes before the midterms. And so does Kuzma.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So you think we're probably within a year of standing in breadlines in Canada?
I think if we don't change what we're doing, Trump will make sure that our economy gets so bad that we start to listen.
Okay, so
one way or another.
I just find it difficult that the Liberals just managed to work out a majority government, and they're going to be around for a while. Do you actually think MPs are going to start turning on Mark Carney?
I to be honest with you, I think there is a group of Canadians who are very unhappy with how he got his majority. Mm-hmm. Let's be very clear. The floor crossers aren't suddenly liberals. They are in it for, as I said in the pandemic, they are there for self-gain. And Canadians are sick and tired of politicians and their self-gain, and all the Carney scandals added together with the floor crossers' self-gain is changing a mood in Canadians as a group. Now, it was already there for 41% of Canadians, okay, the ones that voted Conservative in the last election. Let's just add 10 more percent. Because there comes a point in time where constituency offices are where people express their anger. And I can tell you some of them, like Marilyn Gladue, those constituency offices have seen a lot of anger. And so it's going to start happening to the backbenchers in the Liberal Party. When are you going to get rid of this guy? How long are you going to put up with the destruction of our country for certain ministers' self-gain?
Yeah, my sister lives in Marilyn Gladue's riding down Sarnia-Lambton, and she was absolutely incensed and sad. It was incredibly depressed. She called and complained, but I just don't.
So why don't we use this opportunity? I was always taught in the Army that every challenge presents an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And in combat, but in life as well. Why don't we use this opportunity of growing discontent because of these feelings to build the movement with citizens and give them the words, 6 national interests, a better vision for our country. Let's talk about what Canada will look like in 25 years. I'd love to have that discussion with yourself, John, and with Angela, and with and let's frame out what Canada could be in 25 years and why. Forget the current politics. Canada all alone, what would we want it to look like, right? And then empower people to have that discussion based on 6 national interests and have these meaningful, because unity is cornerstone with national security. And without the two, Trump will have his way, China will have its way, someone will have their way. but it won't be us.
It's been interesting seeing some of the comments popping up from some of the things that people are saying. They're feeling that they're kind of powerless in this situation because, as you've stated, we're waiting for the Liberal voters to come to themselves and to go and talk to their MPs and to start to kind of raise some hell there, right? And I think Albertans, in a lot of ways, we're very tired of waiting or feeling that our votes don't count. They're calling the election before we've even started counting our votes, that type of thing. I know from talking to Albertans, many people feel that there's some hope and some empowerment in the idea of Alberta independence. I can totally
If it lived
see
in a vacuum, I'd agree. But geopolitics say we don't live in a vacuum.
And I understand that, and I very much get that. Can you see in any way, one of the questions that came up was, if we were to have a positive referendum, it triggers negotiations with the rest of the country. Could that serve as that wake-up call that Canadians need?
Yes, definitely. But you better be ready to discuss all 6 national interests and to get the people to take the country to take you seriously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get to the national security one, we really need to have a drill down in all 10 elements. But the work I've seen so far is excellent. Like Keith Wilson and all of the folks that have written all the papers and all the rest of it. I'm going to be talking with Keith when he comes out to debate Kenny at Civitas. Right, I'm a speaker at Civitas, and so when he's there, I really want to sit down and have a long talk with Keith. And the work on the economic prosperity and growth is wonderful. The early discussions about governance are good, but not anywhere near far enough. But you need to frame all 6, and we really need to have a really deep dive when you get to societal well-being to talk about our education system and how we're going to make resilient Canadians again, or resilient Albertans, and starting at junior kindergarten and going up, because we have to do it with parents. I'm a strong believer in the family unit, but we have to convince parents to stop being bulldozer parents.
Well, and that's why we're having this series, right? Is because I totally agree with you that we have done a wonderful job looking at the economic, but when I'm sitting with women, it usually goes far beyond the economics. A lot of them go, oh, yeah, okay, got it. But what about my freedoms? What about my children's opportunities? Not just economically, but to live a life, a free life. And that's
what I hear. But you don't have freedom unless you defend it.
Exactly.
Great Gazoo says, I think Alberta independence will end up being a Western Canada and Eastern Canada. Alberta will be the catalyst for this.
It may. I'm not a great fortune teller. I put it to you, the U.S. can't allow that to happen. I believe in geopolitics.
So you think Donald Trump and the United States of America is going to stop the Alberta independence movement?
No, I don't. I believe it's in his interest for us to separate, to fracture our country more. It makes us easier. And stop blaming Donald Trump.
So he's going to absorb it all.
Destiny far pre Donald Trump. They can't allow their sworn enemy to live on their borders. And the more Canada becomes fractured, the more reality that becomes. And so he's got nothing against Alberta independence. He'd love to make a deal with us.
It's in his best interest.
At a time.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. Okay. All right. So, this is interesting. I'm waiting for Kuzma.
Well, and I'm not, because I'm terrified. Evolution or revolution, and I always come back to that. I'm a guy, I lived all through the Middle East with my rifle, I know where this can go, because people's good intentions don't end up that way. And even within the separation movement, I always go back to the story. In fact, I just had this discussion with one of the big organizers, and I said, you do realize that Trotsky got an ice pick through the eye. So there can be a whole group of people leading the separation movement, but there can only be one at the end, right? And so internally, the fracturization will happen. That once the vote comes in and people realize that maybe they've got a mandate, things start to dissolve internally, and people will help them dissolve internally, the enemies of the citizens of Canada and the enemies of the citizens of Alberta. They will intentionally try to fracture the separation movement in order to get what they want, which is control of our province. And I'm not blaming the US, I'm blaming IRGC, cabals. Yeah, when a country fails, who profits the most? Cartels. And they're here, they're everywhere here.
Okay, so Alberta Nan for Independence says his theory is sound, but there's no time to implement it in Canada. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're talking about somebody coming up with a plan to save Canada now. You're talking within months, Kuzma's going to be here. You're talking within a couple of years, a depression. You're talking within a few years, possibly World War III. Are we out of time?
I'm saying citizens now have to start having these discussions, and I don't mean just in a non-meaningful way, and they have to grab whatever order of government they have most influence with and try and move the goalposts faster.
But we're nowhere near that right now, Dave.
I know, but if we don't start, we never will be. And that's exactly what's been happening. We've been going this way, not this way. We've been going down, not up. And until we at least stop the decline of citizen involvement in their government, we've got to be at least in a position where we have the framework in our minds of how we're going to re-engage and rebuild it. Let's say, just for sake of argument, that Carney does something in the next 4 weeks that cause serious unrest in the country. How do you utilize it? How do you have that discussion? Because if you just go, oh, we'll wait and see what happens, that's where we are right now. That's where we were during COVID. I'm honestly, anyone premier.
I'm sorry, what was that? Pardon me?
Angela?
Well, I was just going to say, I totally agree with you, Dave. I am just afraid that we're to the point where so many Canadians are asleep at the wheel that to wake them up. And you talk about like the WE scandal and all these different scandals, and they have not been enough. And so it's like, so what is it going to take? Is it going to take breadlines? Is that what it's going to take? And
unfortunately, maybe.
Yeah.
But if people aren't ready when that happens, it'll go much longer, right? And so my wife always calls me Pollyanna. I truly believe that you've got one premier in this country that, if was given stronger backing by people, can really start to be a voice. And if we get to the point where the pipeline clearly, and we all know it's coming, is a game, she's got to get real mad and have the citizens behind her to say, enough, right? And then take some other premiers with her, and then you got to start somewhere. And if we just abandoned Poilievre and abandoned Daniel Smith and abandoned Scott Moe, and he pisses me off, but if we can't at least start to be a coalition of the willing to rebuild against countries like China, the IRGC, the cartels, in our own country, forget Donald Trump. If we can't start managing our society better and throw them out of our institutions, like our schools, I'll take you back to my counterterrorism days. The planes hit on September 11th. We built an entire counterterrorism process in our province that the government of the United States adopted. Do you realize that? They came and shopped what we had. But one of the things we learned from our intelligence services, which are now being absolutely ridiculed by our current government, best friend is China. The intelligence services is telling them they're out to kill us. We found out within a month that the largest concentration of ISIS and Al-Qaeda were in Fort McMurray, outside of the Middle East.
Yeah.
Why? Because they were raising money like rat shit. Okay? Brothels, drugs, all that stuff. And they loved us. Just leave us. Now they're doing it in the open. We've got the cartels own all of British Columbia. We've got them owning Prince Edward Island. We as citizens at least have to stop that. And we can.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry, go ahead. You go ahead,
No,
Angela.
no, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this. So if what you say is true about the Alberta independence movement and the challenges that are coming, maybe ask your advice. What should we do to ensure that doesn't happen? Or is there anything that can be done?
I think the Alberta independence movement, number one, needs to start talking about all 6 national interests and clearly define a 25-year vision. Yeah. I think that will inspire others. Okay, I really do. Other provinces. Okay, so have them announce a 25-year vision for Alberta and clearly articulate all the sub-bullets in all 6 national interests. Angela has all my slides with them all subdivided, right? And stop talking just about the injustices that have been done to Alberta and that we're going to get rid of equalization and that they always take our money, and that start talking about a vision, top-down vision brought through groups like Angela's from the bottom up to inspire a complete discussion about what does unity mean for Alberta in the future? What rights and freedoms are we really talking about? How are we going to make an independent media as part of our good governance?
May I, Angela? I'm sorry for jumping in, and may have another question here. Let me ask you this then, Dave. You're in favor of a referendum question. You believe in democracy. You're not necessarily in favor of, we call it independence, not separation, by the way. We'll just straighten that out. But you talk to Keith Wilson, you know members or the people who are involved in the independence movement. Would you be willing to help do that? To help us out?
I would be willing to have a complete workshop on the 6 national interests define a country and a 25-year vision, with them fully understanding that I don't support independence. And they do. But I know some of them hate my guts and others love me. So, and they hate my guts simply because they want to be king, some of them, and they don't understand that I never want to be a king. I'm 72 years old. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
And that's the leadership that we need to be staying away from, right? I mean, if we want to create something that has a 25-year vision, that is prosperous, that is lasting, that is stable, we can't keep doing the same things that we have been doing or have been subjected to by the politicians over the past 40 years. It has to be different. And so, if there are those that want to be kings, please just recuse yourself right now.
But they won't. They want to be kings.
You're always going to have that.
I don't know anybody. You know, I'm kind of privileged here to be able to talk to these people, and I've spoken to most of them on my YouTube channel, and I don't know anybody that wants to be the king right now. Now, who knows what will happen? I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't know anybody like that, Dave, in the movement right now. And what I'm seeing is a growing solidarity, if we can use that word, here in Alberta.
Solidarities are knit till they get 51%. Then solidarity falls to pieces. Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky were the best friends in the universe. And then they weren't.
Okay. We got one here from Lori F. I want to bring this up. She said, I wish David's analytics were 10 years ago. It's too late now. A blunt cut needs to sever the control of Ottawa. We will not survive otherwise.
Great. I hope you have a plan.
Well, that's what.
I hope you have a vision.
That's why we're here.
You're going to help us, Dave. You're going to help us.
Because I haven't seen it yet. And I've seen some really great documents from some really smart people. But they haven't covered the 6 national interests. They've covered one really well and touched on others.
Okay.
Well, Dave, I would love to hear, as we go through the next few weeks here, because we're doing Mondays and Thursdays for the next, we're going to do 7 total. I would love to hear your analysis after hearing some of the ideas of other folks on these different national interests. Maybe at the end we need to bring you back in and just ask for, like, what do you think? Have we missed something?
Well, yeah, and if I might, just before you answer, Dave, maybe this series of interviews could bring you back and you could have Mitch Sylvester on here or Keith Wilson or both or others on to discuss this because we're looking for a leg up here. We're feeling pretty positive about what's happening here. You're bringing some negativity into this, obviously, but perhaps that would be something interesting to hear from the Women's Independent Network. That would be a good one, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I hope what I'm trying to get people to understand is that geopolitics is real.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not a side discussion. It is the predominant discussion. It is the first bullet on national security, geopolitics. Then you get to intelligence services. And so Alberta needs every one of those bullets, but they need to start with a realistic appreciation where they are. And they need to answer the question, is our aim to be Americans or is it to be independent? Because I've seen two different answers come out of the independence movement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you know what, Dave, like, it's eyes wide open. And this is the thing, when I'm sitting with ladies and men in these various meetings, it's like, we're not going to sugarcoat this. Let's not sugarcoat this. There's no ideal answer to the situation that we find ourselves in. There is none. It doesn't matter which way we go. There's going to be roadblocks and there's going to be different things obstacles that we're going to have to overcome. But what does encourage me, and this is why I really wanted to talk to you about unity, is because I see this so many times where these women come in, they sit down, you see the worry and the trepidation on their faces. And through this conversation, eyes wide open, through this conversation, we build a community and they leave with a sense of hope that, you know what? I now have my people. I have had this conversation. I'm a part of it now, and I can contribute something. And whether we separate from Canada or stay in Canada, that is needed. That is so needed. We have been so isolated. And I mean, COVID was just like so in your face, like you must be isolated. But even before that, with the divide and conquer tactics that are constantly used on us by lazy politicians.
Yeah.
We need to come together and we need to have that unity. And like, I have some questions for you about what does it practically look like the practicality of it. For example, immigration. Immigration is something that is needed, but how do we, what are the practical steps that we would take in a good immigration system to ensure that we're bringing people in that have those same shared values and ethics that you've talked about?
We used to have it. And so the exact point of that, I want to circle right back to where you started. You bring women in and you have these discussions. The question is, do you have unity of ethics, values, and beliefs with more than 70% of Albertans? I put it to you, you don't.
Right.
And I'm prepared to have a debate on that in terms of urban versus rural and what's important. But if you do achieve that, then you need to define an immigration policy because immigration links directly to unity. And one of the values that I am unequivocal on, I will not change, is the rights of women. Maybe you don't remember, but I was brought up in a household where my mother was madder than hell that she couldn't join till 1941. So I was raised by a very strong and opinionated mother. And thank goodness I was, because she helped build me who I was. And one of the things she was livid about was that when she joined the armed forces in 1941, she couldn't call herself a Canadian. So that's part of why I'm so proud to be. No, we weren't Canadians till 1949. On her enrollment documents, she had to choose Irish, English, Scottish. She could not choose Canadian. And so I was brought up to be fiercely proud of being a Canadian and that it took so much effort to become Canadians, right? So are the women today that fierce and that proud of being Albertans? that they are prepared to demand legislation to not allow Muslims to immigrate to Alberta in any way, shape, or fashion. Because they do not believe in equality for women, period. Point final. Don't tell me about good Muslims and bad Muslims. Muslims don't agree that women are equal. So who else doesn't agree that women are equal? Now walk through your unity, define what your ethics and truths are, because that's how you define a country. When a group of people who share common beliefs, ethics, and values live in an area and are prepared to defend their borders. So starting with that, first you have to define what you mean by unity. What are the ethics, values, and beliefs that you think at least 70% of Albertans not only agree with, but are prepared to defend? And then that leads to the fourth bullet on national security, which is immigration. The fourth bullet, right? First of all, is after geopolitics is intelligence. Who in the world doesn't want your unity to continue to exist? That's what intelligence services are all about. Who's a threat? Okay? Who's a partner and who's a threat? But first of all, who's a threat? And so that's how you build all the other components. You decide that, okay, we've got 70% of Albertans agree with this. Then the next question is, what do you do with the 30% that are already here that disagree with you? Okay? You have to have that discussion too.
Got a super chat from Prairie Cossack. I want to get to this. Sorry, but after all the Trudeau scandals, bar went so low, I no longer believe, excuse me, in the great liberal awakening. Even in breadlines, they'd rather find more enemies. What do you think?
We've been through it before. Why did Canada switch from a liberal government in 1930 to a conservative government? Because they knew the Liberals couldn't solve the Great Depression. Okay, and my point is, I don't want to go through this again. I want to create a situation where the citizens are ready to establish a vision for our country when it's at its lowest ebb, potentially. Okay, and have the discussion that we just had about immigration and what to do with the 30% that are already here that got here in the last 10 years. Okay, and what are we going to do about that kind of stuff? Because there are countries in the world, there's a million models. Switzerland just banned all mosques. Switzerland just banned prayer. Sweden, Norway, Finland, they're all dealing with the same issue. Why can't we have that discussion as part of this discussion?
But diversity is our strength, said Trudeau. And it's interesting, in a speech just the other day, Carney said at the convention, unity does not mean uniformity, which I think is a very similar thing. Diversity is our strength, but just changing the words a little bit. So this is the government we've got right now, Dave.
Do you know where multiculturalism came from with Pierre Elliott Trudeau?
Well, I remember when it came in, I was probably 10 at the time.
And why did China push it? They said it's because the Chinese are being discriminated in your country. They didn't do it for that reason. They did it because they wanted to control the diaspora in Canada by controlling their families in China, but by making them by us supposedly treating them bad, to make us treat them better, along with, because they always use the French-English fight as the background for it, all cultures. And so we built a program where we spend Canadian taxpayers' money to build community centers for all the different cultures that have immigrated to Canada, to keep them separate, not to integrate, to intentionally keep them separate. And we thought it was wonderful. We Canadians were so proud that we weren't a melting pot like the United States. We were this wonderful, welcoming, multicultural society. You need to have that discussion as part of the unity discussion. Multiculturalism must be removed. Many countries in Europe have already done it. I think Holland did it a long time ago. They removed multiculturalism as a government policy because they knew it destroyed unity.
Yeah.
Got another super chat. I want to get to this. I have the greatest respect for Dave Redman. I do believe wholeheartedly in independence. Dave has a great strategic mind, and his methods have been proven worldwide, is what JP Alberta First said. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate that.
This is to start a discussion, folks. Remember what Angela said at the very beginning, to bring people together in a safe environment to talk about all 6 elements, but focusing to a 25-year vision. Call it a 20-year vision. Make whatever one of it. My proposal is 25 based on how I was taught in Mill College and my belief that it has to be longer than a generation, and a generation is 20 years. So it's got to outlive, you know, if people are 45, by the time they're 60, they should be out of government. And Eva Chipiak had this great discussion with me in this type of a conversation on actually it was on good governance. And she said, what do you believe is the optimum age for people in government? I said 35 to 55, nothing older than 55 and nothing younger than 35, because you need enough life experience, but you need some skin in the game to survive long enough to see through what you're doing. But by the time you're 55, I know personally, your body starts to fail you. And I always called it the epic process. Be ethically fit, physically fit, intellectually fit. And the first 3 are useless without the fourth, which is courage to use the first 3. But when your body starts to let you down and you can't do the campaign trail for 3 weeks, it's time to get out of politics.
I agree.
Let me ask you this. We'll just get back to unity here. Is unity our strength?
It has to be, or you don't have a country. What's the definition of a country? A group of people who share common ethics and values, unity, who are prepared to defend an area of the world they live in, geopolitics, with national defense. Without that, you aren't a country. So if you don't have unity, you don't have a country, period.
And we have no unity right now.
Right now, I believe our country has intentionally been fragmented to have no unity anywhere in our country. And we've done it by pitting sexes against each other, by pitting colors against each other, by pitting cultures, religions against each other, by pitting provinces and territories, east versus west. It's been intentional and to maintain control. And that's what an authoritarian government, I don't care whether you call it fascist or communist, people always say, what's the difference? Make a circle in your mind. At the top is you standing alone in the woods. You're an adult now, you're 18, you can do anything you want. But there's a problem. You have no running water, you have no electricity. So you need to build a community to live in. And you either walk left and give up a little bit of your freedom and start to turn into a socialist economy, or you go right and you turn into a capitalist society. And the further you go around till you get to the middle, if you can stop there with a good solid socialist system like Finland, Sweden, Norway, or a good capitalist society like the United States and Canada used to be. But if you keep going, here you could become a fascist and here you become a communist. But when you hit here, I don't care what label you put on it, it's totalitarian with a dictator. It's a circle, it's not a line. It's not left and right. It's a circle all getting to the same place.
We could probably talk forever. I do want to ask you though, so what is, is there a person, is there somebody that has to come forward in order for us to find the unity you're talking about? Because I see it very, very far away, Dave. I really do.
Well, then I put that out as a challenge to people who are younger than me, because the people of my age can't do it. We are physically, and our time span is short. It's time for people who are 35 to 55 to become motivated by what they see and become involved. And I put it to you, there are some. And I go back to iterative. You may not like Pierre Poilievre, but I do. I think he's a step. And he can definitely be a step. He can definitely free up private sector enterprise. He can definitely reestablish personal freedoms and strongly believes in personal freedoms. He's got a great understanding of social and the understanding of the use of immigration versus the destruction caused by immigration. Let's do it in steps. Let's not just assume everybody's horrible and we need someone new. Let's be iterative. And I'll go for an 80% solution. In the Army, I was taught an 80% solution applied immediately is better than the 100% solution applied 5 minutes late. Everybody dies. Okay? So if you don't like him, then you better figure somebody out, because right now he's the only choice in order to get rid of the tyranny that we've got.
Okay. I'm wondering, Angela, we're going on 2 hours here. Are you thinking maybe we should wrap things up and maybe bring Dave back again?
I'm just looking to see if I had any more questions here.
Go ahead.
Real quick. You know, it's so, when we talk about economic prosperity and good governance, there's ways to measure those things. What is a way that we would measure unity to know that we are unified?
Okay, so first of all, you have to define ethics and values and see if you get any pushback. Actually define them, like I did on that slide. If you disagree with my slide, tell me what's wrong and why, and have a debate about it. And so you actually have to be able to present that, because we used to talk about that kind of stuff in the 1960s. It was part of a discussion. And so if you can't even agree on that, then you're going to have an immigration system that's useless, and you're going to have an intelligence system that doesn't know what to look for as a threat. It's based on, this is what we think Canadians are, and what we want them to be in 25 years, maybe not now, but in 25 years. And so intelligence, tell us who's the threats to having that. I used to do audits for the government on a whole bunch of stuff, emergency management related, but emergency management covers all 10 sectors that make up our economy. So these were audits in the private sector, audits in the government sector. And the first thing you have to do is establish what your mission is, but then you have to establish performance objectives, exactly what you just said. In unity, one of the first performance objectives, and our prime minister said there are no defined values and beliefs. Bullshit. I can define them. Let's have a fight about it. And he refused to have that discussion with anybody. So yes, define them, put them out to your group, and have people say, I agree with that one, I agree with that one, I don't agree with that one. I have that discussion, and then define them as an independence movement. This is what we believe the values of all Albertans are, and let all Albertans then fight about it until you get, so yeah, that's a performance objective. What are the values? What are the beliefs? Because they're different, right?
I like that. Thank you.
That's good. Anything else, Angela?
That was, oh my goodness, we've covered so much tonight. I'm just going to be laying in bed thinking about it.
Well, just to let people know that Sam Cooper and Dave will be back on the 30th. You'll be talking about security, which is, you know, something that needs to be discussed, and that'll be interesting as well. And we've got another one coming up with Eva Chipiak, who you brought up a couple of times here, Dave, and she's fantastic. They'll be talking critical compass. We'll be talking about that on, what is that, Thursday night, right?
Thursday night, yeah.
Protection of rights and freedoms. I think we could go on even further. It's been fascinating to talk to you. It's been interesting questioning you and challenging you as well. And thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but thank you for your service, sir.
It was my pleasure. I loved every minute of being a soldier.
Yeah,
and a Canadian soldier.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate that you did that. Thank you very much. So I guess we'll wrap things up, Angela. Are you good with that?
I'm really good with that. Thank you again, Dave, so much. And John, thank you for hosting this. Like, this is your wheelhouse, and just really, really appreciate you doing this.
Well, I don't normally do these kind of things. I used to do a lot of interviews, certainly not 2 hours long without commercial breaks. I used to do that in the past. But I'd like to say on behalf of the Alberta Women's Independent Network, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
You all have a great one.